Early Monday morning, a longtime New York City livery driver named Douglas Shifter posted an emotional 1,700-word note on Facebook. He said, "Companies do not care how they abuse us, just so the executives get their bonuses. Due to the huge numbers of cars available with desperate drivers trying to feed their families, they squeeze rates to below operating costs and force professionals like me out of business. They count their money, and we are driven down into the streets we drive, becoming homeless and hungry. I will not be a slave working for chump change. I would rather be dead." Later that day, Douglas Shifter took his life outside of City Hall in Manhattan. His suicide has underscored the financial and emotional challenges for professional drivers whose industry has been disrupted, as they put it, by companies like Uber and Lyft. The New York Taxi Workers Alliance represents yellow cab and app-based drivers. Its executive director is Bhairavi Desai. She joins us now from New York. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, I must say Mr. Shifter was very eloquent. Help us understand some of the challenges that drivers face.
Doug really summed up the reality of a vicious race to the bottom. It's a business model that's specifically aimed at turning a full-time profession into part-time, poverty-paid gigs, and no driver wins a race to the bottom.
Are the days gone when a man or woman can drive a cab for 8 or 10 hours and make a living, support a family?
Yes, I had a member tell me yesterday, this is his typical day. He works, he sleeps for 7 hours. He says he has 2 hours for himself to take a shower, eat a meal at home, say hi to his wife and kids if they happen to be at home, and then he's out driving. He hasn't had a day off in 3 years. Long shifts, increasingly isolating. Sometimes you take home 25, maybe $50 at the end of your 12 hours. And the thing is, it feels like there's no end in sight.
What 2 or 3 things would you do if you could?
Well, first and foremost, there really does need to be a cap on the number of vehicles, and I think it'll give, workers a fighting chance at earning a decent living, and it won't clog the streets anymore so others can get around. Also, we need to establish one metered rate. Imagine if across the economy there was no minimum wage to protect the workers. It would be slave-like conditions. Third, we need to see an increase in the rate that we have today for drivers.
The loss of Douglas Shifter is obviously a tragedy. Without getting hyperbolic, do you think his suffering and depression is symptomatic of what a lot of people are feeling?
I've been organizing taxi drivers since 1996, and I've never seen the level of desperation. I started to receive so many calls from drivers seeking resources for suicide prevention and talking about homelessness and eviction notices, and so something has to be done here. This is not accidental. Working people have a right to be protected. We have a right to work with dignity and justice, and that can be done through proper regulation.
Bhairavi Desai is Executive Director of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Put up $20,000 a year like I have to pay my mortgage.
The financial hardship that led to the suicide of a 65-year-old Romanian immigrant and near 30-year veteran of New York's yellow cab industry is becoming a familiar narrative to his colleagues and close friends.
He couldn't take it. I will take it. I will die fighting. I'm not going to leave it like this. It is in my right because I invest in city and they are robbing me now.
The number of yellow cabs in New York City is capped at over 13,000. But for-hire cars like Uber, which face no such limits, have burgeoned since their debut in 2012, more than 60,000 to date.
We are sick and tired of burying our brothers. It is a nightmare. Owner-drivers are going through foreclosures and bankruptcies. Green cab drivers have been entirely abandoned. livery drivers are trying to scrape by.
It was here in front of New York City Hall that livery driver Doug Shifter killed himself using a shotgun in February, just hours after posting a message to Facebook detailing his spiraling economic distress, including 100-plus hour work weeks, a norm among many drivers in the industry.
I didn't have enough money to pay this month's rent.
Fewer pickups mean more hours on the road. For the city's immigrant population, which accounts for more than 90% of all professional drivers, that poses a deepening crisis.
After lease and gas, you not make nothing for yourself. So you have to work like 15, 16 hours, what you're making in before 10 hours,
I'm even surprised that there are no more drivers committing suicide or going on some other sort of rampage at this time, because this business has been so destroyed.
Nigerian native Emmanuel Agbai owns a taxi medallion, a license required for all canary yellow taxicabs. It was once a prized possession costing over $1 million in 2014, but has since fallen to 1/5 that value, coinciding with the rise of app-based services. Customers have more budget-friendly choices, making the option to own or lease a taxi far less profitable.
I want to work, I'm willing to work, ready to work every day to make my living. I love driving cab. In fact, I have a lot of education, but I chose to do this job, okay? At the end of the day, if I cannot make money, my love for this job doesn't mean a thing.
Ramon Taylor, VOA News, New York.
Why are New York taxi drivers killing themselves? It was a somber scene outside New York City Hall on Wednesday afternoon. 4 coffins set at the foot of the steps. One by one, taxi drivers cover them with white flowers before assembling on the steps and shouting for the city to stop greed and stop making us slaves. It was the second such gathering in 2 months, as drivers and their advocates mourned another suicide that they attribute to the rise of ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft. An increase in the number of for-hire vehicles on the city streets, they claim, has made it impossible for drivers to earn a decent living. On March 16th, Nakuna Oshore, a 65-year-old yellow cab driver, took his own life in his Queens home. According to his family and friends, he had been drowning financially as his prized taxi medallion, on which he had hoped to retire, plummeted in value. The circumstances surrounding Oshore's death were upsettingly familiar. In February, drivers Douglas Shifter shot himself outside City Hall after posting a lengthy statement to Facebook blaming politicians for letting the streets get so saturated. According to New York Taxi Workers Alliance, a nonprofit group, the Advocates for Drivers, at least 2 other drivers have killed themselves since December in response to mounting financial pressures. At Wednesday's rally, Bhairavi Desai, the executive director of NYTWA, described the situation as a living nightmare. The assembled drivers echoed her sentiment. Nureddin Afsi said he began driving a yellow cab in 2001 when a friend said it would be easier money than his job in retail. You could work 9 hours and easily make $200 in a day, he recalled. Now you're lucky if you make $50 or $60. Beresford Simmons, who had been driving a yellow cab for more than 50 years, expressed a similar frustration. At 71 years old, he said he had just had heart surgery and was on dialysis, and he was in no financial position to take a break from driving. We have guys at home who are losing their houses, he said. I know cab drivers who are homeless today. The anguish and anger on display at City Hall offer an unsettling look at the cost of disrupting long-standing industries. Until recently, driving a cab in New York was a gateway to the middle class, especially if drivers could get their hands on a coveted medallion, essentially a permit to operate their own cabs rather than leasing cars from others. With the number of medallions fixed, prices generally rose, peaking in 2014 at over $1 million. Well outside the budget of many drivers, but good news for medallion owners who sometimes borrowed against them. Since then, though, prices have fallen sharply as competition from ride-hailing services intensified. In January, 7 medallions sold for under $200,000 each. Many drivers are deeply in debt and a long way from the stable lifestyle they once expected. Drivers assembled at City Hall on Wednesday afternoon called for regulation now and demanded that the city stop Uber's greed. To call it an engine of social mobility would be overstating it. But driving a taxi is definitely a way that men without college educations have found to raise families, to provide family wages for a long time, said Julia Ticona, a sociologist studying technologies of work, emotions, and inequality at the Data and Society Research Institute in New York. For taxi drivers, disruption is not only financially destabilizing, but also demoralizing, as it recasts their careers as gig work. A longtime taxi driver who prides himself on knowing the ins and outs of the city's streets is now competing with tens of thousands of newcomers, some of whom may only be driving as a part-time side hustle. There's this tension between older sets of professional norms and the ways that labor platforms are encouraging workers to promote themselves and be entrepreneurial, says Ticona. Though New York City caps the number of yellow cabs at just over 13,600, it doesn't limit the number of drivers for Uber, Lyft, or other services. It does, unlike most U.S. cities, require that rideshare drivers be licensed by the Taxi and Limousine Commission. The lack of regulation has led to rapid growth. Uber launched in the city in 2011 with just over 105 cars on the road. By 2015, that had ballooned to 20,000. And today there are more than 63,000 black cars providing rides through various ride-hailing apps, 60,000 of which are affiliated with Uber. Those rallying on Wednesday argued that growth is affecting all drivers, including those for Uber and Lyft. The business model Uber and Lyft is destroying every driver across the sector, said Desai. They are destroying the full-time jobs of professional yellow cab, green cab, livery, and black car drivers and replacing them with poverty-paid gigs where Uber and Lyft drivers cannot survive. A 2017 survey of drivers by the Independent Drivers Guild, which represents app-based drivers, found that 57% of respondents earn less than $50,000 per year, and 22% earn less than $30,000 per year. As much as some taxi and app-based drivers may see each other as competition, they also are united on several fronts. They all want to make more money. The IDG is petitioning the city to require apps to raise driver pay by 37%. And the NYTWA is demanding that the city raise yellow cab rates and make them the minimum for all app-based services. Both groups also want the city to cap the number of new entrants as they worry that demand isn't keeping pace with the increasing supply of drivers. Uber and Lyft bring on hundreds of new drivers per week, though some quickly quit. A recent analysis by Bruce Schaller, a former NYC traffic and planning commissioner, showed that the hours that taxis and rideshare vehicles spend unoccupied in central Manhattan increased by 81% between 2013 and 2017. Without passengers, drivers don't earn money. We don't care about competition, said Afsi, who began driving for Uber after leasing a yellow cab for 9 years. When you work 14, 15 hours and go home with $50, it's not good. It's not about competition. It's about survival. Drivers and their advocates hope that, if anything, the recent string of suicides will compel New York City to further regulate the industry and avoid full-throttle race to the bottom. The city has considered capping the number of for-hire vehicles on the road in 2015. However, Uber campaigned against the cap, and the city council did not pass the legislation. Now, city council member Stephen Levine is again proposing a temporary fees on new for-hire vehicles licenses while the city studies the impact of the industry's growth. That's one of the several proposals for mitigating the effects of more ride-hailing. Last fall, council member Edanis Rodriguez introduced a bill that would allow medallion owners to operate 2 vehicles under a single medallion, help boosting the value of the medallions. Rodriguez has previously suggested that the city bail out medallion owners, saying that we should find a form of restitution to those who have invested in our city's future through the purchase of medallions. Another city council member, Ruin Diaz Sr., introduced a bill last month meant to slow the growth of app-based for-hire services with, among other things, a $2,000 annual fee on every vehicle affiliated with an app-based service. And the TLC is considering piloting a program that would let taxi drivers offer upfront cost estimates. In theory, that would help them attract passengers who currently prefer the cost predictability of Uber to the traffic-dependent price of yellow cabs. All those proposals share one critical element. They place the burden for change on the city rather than the ride-share companies, and perhaps for good reason. Though app-based companies could theoretically waive wages or cap their pool of drivers on their own, they have no incentive to curb their growth. The only place a solution will possibly come from is from the public policy, said Schaller, the former NYC Traffic and Planning Commissioner. The app-based services are hell-bent on growth. And if I were the CEO at Uber and had announced that I plan to take the company public next year, I would be too. In a statement, Uber pointed at steps it has recently taken to win back its drivers' trust, such as introducing in-app tipping and allowing drivers to earn more while waiting to pick up riders. Drivers told us we need to do better, and we have been working hard to earn back their trust and improve the driver experience, said spokesman at Lyft. A Lyft spokesperson said the company is in ongoing conversations to find solutions to complex challenges in New York in order to provide the best transportation for passengers and earning opportunity for those who drive with Lyft. The New York City Council created a new committee on for hire vehicles in 2018. That committee had its first hearing shortly after Shifter's suicide in February. For several hours, drivers and advocates delivered emotional testimony and asked for a cap on the number of vehicles on city streets. TLC Commissioner Mira Joshi appeared receptive to the idea of stricter regulation, acknowledging at the hearing that the expanding industry will continue to make driving a very stressful career without any growth control mechanism. Some sort of growth control mechanism would likely ease the impact that the ride-sharing boom has had on drivers across the industry. But the days of being able to retire on a yellow cab medallion might be a thing of the past. People are frozen in place, dreaming of the idea that the medallion system is about to recover, said Schaller. This can turn out perfectly fine for yellow cab drivers. It's very difficult to see how it could be fine for yellow cab medallion owners. In other words, it may not be possible to protect every worker from the negative effects of disruption, but there is hope that new regulations might keep drivers from going to the desperate extreme that the city has seen in recent months. Okay, we're starting to see the effects of this. I mean, anybody could tell you that this is coming, and anybody could have told you that this is going to be a problem. And this is a problem that is happening without self-driving cars. What do you think is going to happen when automated cars or self-driving cars actually make their entrance into the cab services? You got 60,000 cars on the road, cabs in the New York City. Imagine when they're replaced by self-driving cars, how many people will be out of jobs or side gigs. You got cab drivers killing themselves because they've invested in a job that may not be there. And this is just one industry. We're not talking about truck drivers. We're not talking about auto workers, because when the self-driving car boom comes and automation comes in, a lot of auto workers won't have jobs because most people won't need cars. As you can see now, the problem with this is that there's too many cars on the road now as far as taxis and Uber and Lyft, and there's not enough people, not enough customers. And as people lose jobs, it's a ripple effect. People lose jobs, they have less and less need for a service. As they have less and less need for a service, the people that provide the service lose their jobs. And there's a ripple effect. There's going to be a ripple effect through the economy. Automation is not going to just affect one person and not affect everybody else. Every time one person loses a job, everything that they spend on, from clothing to food to cars to all kinds of other services and goods, they cut their need for it. That puts other people out of work. It's always a ripple effect. The economy is connected. There is no such thing as being an individual and have an individual job. You are a link in the chain. You are a cog in a great wheel. Taxi driver loses his job, loses his house. Everybody else that's around him that he does business with or he provides a service to him also starts losing jobs and losing money. It has to be addressed. There's going to have to be some kind of conscious effort to plan for this stuff. It is going to come. Congress will push this through. And this is just one sector. One sector. How many more people are going to be affected? How many more men are going to commit suicide? And these are white men. These are middle-class white men. These are not low, unpaid, unskilled people. These are not in Appalachia where the coal mine is closed down. And these are the guys that you know have killed themselves that have left notes. How about the drivers, the people that shot themselves up with opioids and overdose and never came back? I know this is a black channel. I know nobody cares about white men, which is fine. I don't blame you. But the thing is, black people do not live in a bubble. If that white man gets a cold, you get the flu. If that white man gets the flu, you get the pneumonia. If he loses a job, that means 5 guys in the black community lose jobs. That's the way the economy works. Take heed. Be prepared. Don't get caught slipping. I've been warning you guys for 2 years that this stuff is coming. It's here. It's not all the way here. You haven't felt the full impact of it yet, but it is here. You can see it. I know this is Easter. This is about resurrection. You need to come back and start reinventing yourself. You're going to have to if you're going to survive, if you're going to prosper in this coming maelstrom. But that's all I have. I'm going to jump off of here. This is BGS out, and I will see you guys on the next one.